Great to have Gemma on the programme. Undoubtedly, once we announced that Gemma was coming on, a lot of people got in touch with us to say that they wanted to send a personal thanks to her for speaking out for the families of girls who feel very strongly that they've had a very negative reaction after being given the HPV Gardasil vaccine. And this is something that came to this programme a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and we've been talking about it often and ever since. Now, you announced only a short time ago on Twitter that you were coming on the programme. Thank you very much for that, by the way, bringing us a few extra listeners. Love that. But you've triggered a few. Already there are people, somebody called Kim Vaccines Work and somebody called Owen Hanley, and they are saying that you are politicising the name of Emma Vic Vahuna, whom I know you want to talk about. I don't believe you're politicising her name. I think you're right to talk about her and to talk about HPV. Were you prepared yourself, despite all the crap you've had to put up with over the years when you've gone after big stories, the sort of nonsense that kind of vomits forth when you dare to ask questions about this particular vaccine? Have even you been surprised by the reaction you've had, Gemma?
Yeah, I have, and it'll embolden me. So to any of the trolls out there listening, bring it on, because the more they target me on this, the stronger it makes me. So it's just not working. Yeah. I will stand up for these children and their parents if it is the last thing I do. This HPV vaccine will, and I can be quoted on this ad nauseum now, I'm going to say it, will turn out to be the biggest health scandal of our times. I am absolutely convinced of that. If you had asked me that 4 weeks ago, I would have said, what are you talking about? But something very strange happened to me when I was involved in the presidential campaign, which my manifesto was about corruption. Corruption. That's all I wanted to talk about. For some reason, every time I did an interview with the mainstream media, they were bringing up the HPV vaccine. Wow. I'm thinking, I want to talk about corruption. Yeah. No, we want to talk about HPV. There was one interview I did with the Sunday Business Post, Hugh O'Connell, the reporter, who harangued me during the interview to say if I was president, would I support the HPV vaccine? I'm looking at him thinking, are you going crazy? What are you talking about? And I said, well, as a journalist, it's always been my job to say, is something safe rather than something is safe? I said, Hugh, you can say it is safe, but I will always say, is it safe? Because by asking, is it safe, you make something safer. All of these pharmaceutical companies, food companies, all of them have to be regularly held to account by the media to make sure that everything is safe. Because when an institution is not held to account, where there is no oversight, well, then that's when problems happen and we get food scandals and food scares, etc. So during the campaign, I became very, very concerned that due to the hysteria in the mainstream media about this vaccine, that there was something wrong with it. So when it was over, I made a promise to myself that I am going to investigate this, because every female child in this country is getting that vaccine now. I suspect many of them now won't, due to new evidence that has come into the public domain, but they're also trying to give it to boys now as well through the school system.
Which is insane. That in itself is insane, right?
It's insane. I mean, look, okay, cervical cancer is a very rare cancer. As admitted by one of the poor women, Vicky Phelan, who was unfortunately, as a result of poor screening, her cancer has been allowed to develop. But this cancer is entirely preventable. Vicky Phelan has said that herself recently, and it is entirely preventable through good screening. So why it is we are risking the health of our children by giving them a vaccine, which it now emerges is not safe. Its safety trials are profoundly flawed, and this has emerged in a number of articles recently. Why we are risking the health of our children on the false claim that we are curing this very, very rare preventable cancer, it is ludicrous. There's so many aspects to this vaccine that are terrifying, and they terrify me. We could take a while to go through them, but Richie, I mean, I don't know if there's anything specific really that you're interested in talking about in relation to the vaccine.
No, it's brilliant work you're doing, because I've gone into it so many times, and of course I've managed to bring GPs, not alternative health practitioners, because they love to ridicule the alternative health practitioners, which is pathetic and condescending. But I've had GPs on from various countries, reputable GPs, who've said that there are so many issues with the testing of this. Merck's own documentation actually says that it is possible to have some of the problems that the girls are having. To me, it's kind of open and shut, Gemma. But what I've been very interested in is the vitriol and the venom and the hatred directed at the families who've had the courage to speak up by people like David Robert Grimes, I think, whom I've taken to task on this program. I invited him on, he wouldn't come on, and others who've actually accused them of child abuse. And just before you come back in, Gemma mentioned earlier on, Gemma O'Doherty's our guest, by the way. She mentioned earlier the trolls can bring it on. Do you know what's really sickening about these people? They've all been invited on, and they've been given the strictest of assurances that I will never get out of order with them, that I will behave as any presenter should behave and let them speak and put the counterpoints to them. But they refuse to come on. They prefer to name call and to abuse on Twitter than actually come on to a public forum and say, well, I'll tell you why the vaccine is safe, and I'll tell you why you're a scaremonger, Richie Allen or Gemma O'Doherty. They prefer not to do that. They refuse to come on. That cheeses me off. So I'm in no doubt that the evidence, Gemma, I mean, if you want to talk about a couple of key points, I mean, the obvious points where the irrefutable facts about this vaccine and why you should think very, very hard about whether your daughter gets it or not.
Well, I mean, certainly, I've had to educate myself about it in the last few weeks, and what I have learned has just been absolutely terrifying. I mean, for example, when children are given this vaccine in secondary schools in Ireland, parents cannot make informed consent in relation to the potential adverse side effects because they are not given the patient information leaflet when they are asked to sign the consent form. Now, that patient information leaflet is contained in every packet of Gardasil manufactured by Merck, and it outlines the very potentially serious adverse effects that this drug can inflict on children and is inflicting on many healthy girls who are being described by our health service as emotional terrorists, and their parents are too. These are children who were injured by this drug. There's no doubt about that. Healthy, perfectly healthy girls who were given this vaccine suddenly are getting a whole range of bizarre symptoms, and they have been treated despicably by the health service. Their families cannot get treatment for them. It's unthinkable what is happening to these families and to these girls whose lives, many of them were very healthy, very sporty children, and suddenly they get this vaccine and everything changes. Now, when parents were not aware, some of the parents that I've been dealing with, they were not aware that they were being denied the patient information leaflet by the HSE. But the HSE, the Health Service in Ireland, took it upon themselves not to give parents this information. So therefore, parents cannot give informed consent. Now, I'd say down the road, the Irish taxpayer is going to have to pay out a fortune, and rightly so, although it's always the taxpayer that has to fund
these
compensation schemes.
Brilliant point. Further down the road, the Irish state's going to have to cough up, if not hundreds of millions, maybe even a couple of billion quid. And that is why people listening to this who might be indifferent to it or who might be predisposed to thinking that all conspiracies are all nonsense, fair enough, you think that if you want, but there's enough evidence out there to at least put a moratorium on this and to at least get an independent inquiry into the efficacy and the safety of it. You hit the nail on the head there, Gemma. It could cost the taxpayer untold amounts of money in the future.
And that's why Simon Harris and the Health Service don't care, because the taxpayer will bail them out every time. If we had prison sentences for ministers who abused public money, and more importantly, who abused people who were victims of incompetence in the health service, if we had prison sentences for those ministers, they might think twice before they carry out these appalling crimes. And they are crimes. But I mean, the other really important thing that's happened in relation to the HPV vaccine recently has been the release of a new book in America called The HPV Vaccine on Trial, which was written by two renowned lawyers and an Irish researcher, Eileen Iorio. And this book it's just damning in what it has uncovered in relation to the vaccine. And the person who wrote the foreword of this book is the former Nobel Prize winner, the virologist who discovered the HIV virus, Luc Montagnier. And he describes the HPV vaccine as a crime against children. Now, this is one of the most renowned scientists in the world. But some of the things that they have uncovered is that HPV vaccines have never been proven to prevent cancer of any kind. They also found that there were no participants in the original HPV trials that received true saline placebos. They have exposed that the trials themselves never explored the possible effects on human fertility or their potential to cause cancer. Now, it has previously been alleged that the safety trials were flawed. And that in itself is a major problem for Merck, who has been brought into disrepute in the past, not least in relation to its production of its arthritis drug, Vioxx, which is alleged to have killed, I believe, more than 50,000 people, and which cost Merck billions in compensation. And, there's a theory out there that the HPV vaccine is actually an alternative way of saying help pay for Vioxx. That's one of the theories that is there, because Merck lost so much money as a result of compensating families in relation to that drug.
The Irish people, Gemma, sorry to interrupt you, the Irish people don't know this. Neither do the people of this country. I've been looking into these companies for years. Their testing methods are sick. They are satanic. They go to the poorest countries in the world and they pay a pittance for poor men and women, young men and women, to trial their crap on. And often then afterwards then will, omit certain things, certain findings, certain data that doesn't suit them. And then they will say they got it passed and they will get it through the FDA in America or over here. They are satanic. The methodology.
I mean, what is really frightening about this is how Merck has embedded itself with certain agencies by giving them donations, and then those agencies go out and tell the whole world that this is the safest vaccine ever to appear on the planet. For example, the Irish Cancer Society has been pushing this vaccine to a point that it is embarrassing. And then you check the coffers of the Irish Cancer Society and you see that they got over $200,000 from Merck. I've been highlighting the fact that a number of very vocal so-called spokespeople, in the media and in medicine in Ireland, who are pushing this vaccine relentlessly, have also been in the pockets of Merck, doing little conferences for them here and there. Now, what is happening in the rest of the world, and you won't hear any of this in the mainstream media in relation to the HPV, is that there are lawsuits all over the place progressing against Merck, including in the United States, in India, Japan, Colombia, Spain, France, We know, for example, that the vaccine, it's targeted for 11 to 12-year-olds, but only a tiny fraction of the clinical trial subjects was actually in this age range. We don't even know how long the vaccine will work for. And we are giving this to children at an age long before we hope they are sexual.
Imagine that, yeah.
We don't even know how long it's going to last. You know, this is high risk. Our children are being used as guinea pigs. And I would say today to any parent of any child that is due to get this vaccine, hold off. Teach your children, look, you know, this vaccine, it's all hyped up about it. You know, it's the great cancer vaccine. We finally found a vaccine for, you know, to tackle cancer. That is the utopia we all dream of, but it's not the reality. Parents should be saying to their children, you know, just hold back. If you look after yourself and your body, you're not going to get this HPV virus. Protect yourself. You know, don't be going off with every Tom, Dick and Harry when you're older. And I actually think some of this is to do with the early sexualization of children, which is rampant in our society at the moment. And we need to start saying to kids, there is a better way, actually, because look, we've seen it in Ireland. When your sexuality is destroyed as a child, we see the legacy that leaves people when they are adults. The more I look into this drug, the more I really question, what is it all about? Why are we giving this to children at such a young age, pretty much telling them you're going to be very sexually active with lots of different partners when you're older, and this is the way it's going to be? Well, actually, does it have to be that way? Why does it have to be that way? What are we actually teaching children? But this vaccine, I would tell any parent tonight, stay away from it unless you are absolutely sure. And at the moment, the jury is still very, very much out. No matter what nonsense you hear spouted from the HSE, Simon Harris, the mainstream media, and some, you know, so-called doctors that I would seriously question their own motivations on it. But I'd like to talk about Emma Vic-Mahuna as well.
Yeah, just before you do, let me just do this, because we've got about 9 minutes left on this. If I go over 6, which I will do because it's important, but I've got to be done by about 5 past the hour. Just before you speak about Emma, in the interest of fairness and balance, Thomas Brunkard has tweeted, listening to the show featuring Gemma plugging a book by 2 lawyers. The old tropes are coming back. Saline placebos, Protocol 18, question mark, he says. Gemma theorises that Gardasil is a way of spending money to pay for Vioxx. Mad stuff, he says. And then he says, Mr. Allen uses the adjective satanic. Thomas, don't be dishonest. I used the adjective satanic to describe the practices of Merck, going to third world countries to test medication on the poorest people on the planet who can't do anything about it when the medication kills them. It's a fair comment, right? But anyway, the old tropes are coming back. Mad stuff.
Look, I'd say to that man, if he had a child at home tonight who got that vaccine, was perfectly healthy and is now lying on the sofa getting seizures every few minutes, who's now in a wheelchair, whose life has been destroyed, what teenager would make that up? What teenager in the full of her health would suddenly just collapse into a heap? No. This is happening. You only have to look at the World Health Organization database on the injuries caused by this vaccine. There's 80,000 plus. It is frightening. These children must be heard and we must look after them if we are a civilized society. So I'd say to him, isn't he a lucky man that he does not walk in the shoes of these parents and these children?
Brilliant comment, Gemma. Listen, spend a couple of million now on an inquiry. All right, if you've got to pay barristers and if you've got to pay certain doctors, certain experts, it might cost you 10 million euro to run an inquiry, but an independent one. Go ahead and spend 10 million rather than spend 20 billion in 10 or 15 years' time on compensation payouts. 20 billion might be an exaggeration. Gemma, we're 3 minutes to the top of the hour. We can go till about 5 past. I know you wanted to talk about Emma, and because it was mentioned earlier on again by one of your, let's be kind and let's say opponents, who said that you were politicising Emma and her name and what happened to her. And go on, answer that then.
Well, look, I mean, these people are terrified now. I mean, what is happening is there's a wave of fear that the truth is being revealed about the dangers of the HPV vaccine and that it's not necessary and that it's an outrageous waste of public money. So, you know, the trolls are coming out in full force. I mean, these people are bullies. And all bullies are cowards. They're terrified that the truth is coming out. Emma Vicknahuna was a woman who was not going to be silenced. Poor Emma lost her life yesterday at the age of 37, and today her 5 little children are facing life without their mother due to the corruption within our health service, who provided a very shoddy screening service for the women of Ireland. These are the facts. But Emma, throughout her illness, minding her beautiful little children, saying goodbye to them in the way that she did, was also becoming a very dangerous, powerful voice, because she was not willing to be bought or silenced. And in the final weeks of her life, Emma was becoming concerned that she was being used as a salesperson for the HPV vaccine. And she put up a number of posts in relation to this, in which she said, the HSE have asked me to do an ad after the audit and keep pushing me to say that if I had the vaccine, I wouldn't be in this position. If you don't mind, Fine Gael, I am very sick, and keep your nasty agenda always, how you do, you know, just keep your nasty agenda out. Now, she says, I am not an advertisement for the HPV vaccine, and if they don't stop, I begin to think they want me to die. And if that happens, no one get the vaccine. She described, she described Simon Harris using a word that I think I won't repeat it, but it's a word that most of us feel about him at the moment. And she says she's looking at a picture of him promoting the vaccine. He's such an insensitive bee. Emma said it as it is. Emma spoke the truth. She was a liability. She was a danger, because we don't see a lot of that in Ireland now. We don't see people putting their heads above the parapet because they see what happens when they do. But Emma, even though she was dying, facing into the terrifying prospect of saying goodbye to her 5 beautiful children, she was still fearless in speaking the truth. Fearless. And she said something else other than cervical cancer and the vaccines. What about all of the young girls whose lives have been destroyed by the vaccine? Now, Emma cared about those girls, and her legacy is one that should be to them. It should speak to those girls, and it will, because I intend to continue that legacy that she started. She could see through the false narrative that is being spun about this vaccine. And I spoke to her a couple of times. She was a brave, brave lady. And though she may be physically gone from this world, her spirit will continue. And nobody will silence me in relation to that. They can call it political for all they want. These people are cowards. They're bullies. There is no place for them in Irish society. They are yesterday's people, and they should hang their heads in shame.
It's redundant to suggest that you've attempted to politicise it, because Emma's own words couldn't have been any stronger. You know, in her own way, she was attempting to get it on the political agenda and to get people to take it seriously and to look at it. So I didn't understand that earlier on. I thought that was a bit pathetic.
They, at this stage, Richie, they're running out of excuses, these trolls. I don't even know what that means, attempting to politicise it. I'm not a politician. I don't have any political allegiances. In fact, I have said recently that there isn't one political party in Ireland that is up to the job. They've all disgraced themselves recently. So what that means, but these people are not normal, rational, thinking human beings. They're not allowed to think.
Or empathetic.
They abuse. All they can do is shout abuse at you, call you names. They are cavemen.
Listen, do me a favour, folks. Follow Gemma on Twitter if you haven't before. It's at Gemma OD. Gemma OD, the letters OD1, if you haven't before. I've tweeted out links to some of the information that Gemma's been talking about today. I will tweet out links later, and I'll put something on the website tomorrow as well. Great work, Gemma. I make no secret of it. I don't pretend. I don't try to hide behind the claim of objectivity. I think what you're doing is brilliant, and I would like to have you back on again in the very, very near future to take up some of those other things we talked about briefly today, and when we spoke off air today as well. I'd be really grateful to have you back on. Brilliant stuff.
Thanks so much, Richie. Thanks for giving me the time, and you keep up the great work, because it's not easy, but I think the mainstream media now know that the game is up, and people are switching over to programs like yours where they do get the actual facts.
Well, they are, because we're giving a platform to people whom they won't interview, and and we're inviting the other side of it to come on as well. I mean, one of the things they do, Gemma, just before you go, is, and it's pathetic, when they do reply to you, they come back and say, well, I'm not coming on because you're some ridiculous conspiracy theorist, and because you used to be friends with this person or whatever. It's just ridiculous. It's redundant. And you say to them, listen, forget about all that. I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm going to moderate properly. I won't get in the way, and we'll give you a bit of time. Let's hear from everybody. And I think it's very telling that they absolutely refuse to come on and be adult and be mature and not shout and scream and say why it is they feel the way they feel. I think it's very telling. But anyway, I'll give you the final word on that to you.
They are the conspiracy theorists. I mean, I think it was Goebbels who said, accuse the other side of that which you are guilty. And that says it all about these people. They are the conspiracy theorists. They are the ones who cannot argue rationally with logic and strong arguments, because they have no argument. So they just turn to abuse. They abuse, call you names, and they think that in a modern civilized society that's going to work for them. It isn't. Not anymore.
More power to you. Eileen has been listening, by the way. Eileen Yorio, who was heavily involved in that book. I'm hoping to connect with Eileen real soon as well. Gemma, more power to you. Keep it up, and you're welcome back anytime, you know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richie. Take care.